This is the KJ Singh Show with your host KJ Singh. I have a joke for you. What do you call a political party that celebrates a past politician who increased unemployment, that made the country more unequal, made the rich richer, of course, made the poor poorer, the working class poorer, increased the cost of house prices, making it harder to get on a property ladder, and of course decreased interest rates, so it made it easy for people who had money already to begin with to borrow more, and basically outsourced a lot of manufacturing industries for the British working class. What do you call this party? And also, of course, destroyed labor rights, labor unions, and so therefore, increased the rate of profit for those who already had the money, who already owned the means of production, but decreased the workers' rights, the rights of labor. What do you call this party? You call this the modern day Labour Party, because that's where it seems to be leading now. This is really disappointing, and it's par for the course. After Keir Starmer rejected every single one of the pledges he pledged, he promised upon becoming the leader of the Labour Party, talk about stabbing your own constituents in the back. He's decided to, along with his Chancellor, Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, and they've decided to really celebrate the legacy of Margaret Thatcher. Now, Margaret Thatcher is peculiar because, like Ronald Reagan, she brought on one of the main figureheads of the new liberal movement, or neoliberalism, which freed up the markets from working class interests. Why is that the Labour Party is now just a understudy for the Conservative Party? Why is it they're just pro-ruling class right now? Why is it they're just representative of Rupert Murdoch? Why don't these people join a different party, Liberal Democrats or the Conservative Party? Well, we know why now, because of course there are several reasons to this. Labour Party now has become just a party where people who cannot enter the Conservative Party join in order to gain power. That's essentially what it's become. They've become the Red Tories, with, of course, the aesthetics of being this morally superior being. Of course, they've lost that with their support of a genocidal campaign on the Gazan people. They've lost it a long time ago with their support of neoliberal Margaret Thatcher. And they've been accelerating their commitment towards the ruling, an alliance with the ruling class. They've done everything to just not have a spine, not do the right thing. These people will virtue signal about coming from a working class background. His dad being a tool maker, he did, of course, make a tool to betray the working class. Because let's put this into context. Margaret Thatcher, she's celebrated in the conservative right-wing media as being somebody who helped and stimulate the economy. She did some things that did improve the economy. Well, it depends what you mean by the economy. If it means certain graphs going up, yes, she helped that. Unfortunately, the economy, the improvement of the economy, according to the right wing, isn't necessarily an improvement for living standards for their everyday person. When it should, that's what it should mean. That's what Gary Stevenson says in his Gary's Economics YouTube channel. Something I really recommend checking out, because when you have this push towards making things easier for big business whilst making things harder for workers' rights, you create a power imbalance and you accelerate inequality. Margaret Thatcher when she got into power, inflation was at a high and she decreased it. That is true. She decreased interest rates. That is true. And she decreased inflation by, part of it was to hone in on workers' rights and to decrease their ability to bargain. That's for sure. I believe every month there were something like 900,000 disputes. It decreased to about 138,000 when she stopped. Problem is, she destroyed the working class power to the detriment of the entirety of the UK, because GDP, the rate of GDP decreased, unemployment increased. And instead of actually, I understand like when you want to dissolve an industry like the coal mining industry, which of course is not particularly good for the climate situation, but you take responsibility for the dissolving of these industries by retraining programs, by investment in their communities. That's the way you are govern like a true leader. You don't just throw a flash in the pan just to kind of destroy the fabric of society, because you have huge hotspots within north of the UK, which both in Scotland and also North England, as well as scattered around the country. Our seasides are declining as well. But when these manufacturing industries were sometimes outsourced, or the facilities taken out of commission, there was no retraining program to get these people onto a different track. There was no consideration for these people. And so the famous quote by Margaret Thatcher, which says, "There's no such thing as society." In other words, everything, every individual is for themselves, by themselves, which is ridiculous, because she literally used the power of the state to destroy working right bargaining power. Which I would say the ability to bargain, especially when the power level is so different, when you have big businesses with self-interest in mind, they can lobby governments to restrict the power of labour unions. It means that people are subservient to those who already have the money. It already creates a power imbalance. So, and Margaret Thatcher took this baton and ran with it. She destroyed, essentially labour rights. This is basically antithetical to the party that stands for Labour. And during this time, of course, Labour really honed in on the fact that they were called Labour, and there's historically, they did champion the rights of the Labour Party. And it's quite interesting that when we actually truly appreciate our lives, as following World War II, when the whole country is obliterated, it just so happens that we tend to appreciate our lives, and also consider that and understand that the ruling class have no power without everyone else. The corporate leaders, the corporate hawks, even the military, they don't have any power without the consensus of the people. But what Margaret Thatcher did was take the working class for granted and destroy their power. And so with the decline of the workers' rights, you had increase in profitability of big corporations. That was a plus for the Times, the Daily Mail, standards for what constitutes a good economy. Living standards decreased in terms of, of course, unemployment increased. Of course, the ability to buy houses was, ability to buy houses for a little while increased, but then it slumped because, of course, once the housing market, dried up, as the right to buy scheme was implemented in order to allow people to buy their own council homes, it just so turned out that there wasn't enough being built, so the price of houses skyrocketed, and this increased into Tony Blair's term, and this is why we call Tony Blair the one who ushered in generation rent. Although Tony Blair himself, he just simply adopted some of Margaret Thatcher's economic policies. So all in all, Margaret Thatcher was good for big business, for those financiers, for those who are the neoliberal masters of the economy. Is very bad for the working class. She did very little to ease the burdens on the working class. And after she left power, there was another recession. She really, and if you think about what recession is often when you don't have enough people who are working to have buying power. Often that would create enough stimulation within an economy. That's one of the reasons. Of course, there are multiple reasons, but as recessions are endemic and also constitute a fundamental part of our current capitalistic system, the peaks and troughs. Only that in a recession, the corporate warlords, the corporate masters of industry, they're the ones who make a big buck, because of course they can just bet on losses that the rest of the country experience. So that's why that's the kind of situation we are in. The Labour Party are celebrating Margaret Thatcher, not just because of what Keir Starmer said in terms of, we want to usher in renewal of the economy with these, supply side economics, which is basically trickle down economics. Essentially, if you give more power to big business, somehow it trickle down. Only that Labour Party are not going to reel back any of the tax cuts that the Conservative Party have implemented. So where will the Labour Party get the money to actually truly stimulate the economy that will benefit the people? It just seems that all the power is going to the top. Very little consideration for the climate change. With the slashing of the 28 billion green investment pledge, we are just going to see a decline in anything else that matters in the world. No consideration for what's happening in Gaza, no consideration for climate change. It's just winning power for the sake of winning power. And this is what centrism is. It's a careerist end for a lot of people. And Rachel Reeves herself, in the Times very recently, they're kind of, putting together a narrative which puts her as this, this girl boss, as like the next Margaret Thatcher, the Labour version of Margaret Thatcher, which only appeals to people who are socio-economically illiterate, because she was not good for the working class, for the party that is called Labour. Yeah, so that's where we are right now. And it seems like things are going to be accelerating towards right, because when you have the fallout from climate change, when you have the fallout from these wars, when you have an increase in the refugee crisis, when you have the fallout from Brexit, and the need for the economy to be stimulated, and part of the reason why, this is something I may discuss in future. Part of the way the economy gets stimulated is through foreign affairs, through essentially wars. This is part of the reason why the war was a big part of Tony Blair's campaign, big part of the US campaign. They stimulate their economy by sometimes going to war, but also stimulating, or rather funding and supporting countries like Ukraine and Israel, by donating, or rather funding them with billions of pounds of aid, so that they buy into the US military industrial complex and stimulate the military corporations that way, which means that taxes paid for by the people, American people, the British people, are going towards another country buying. So basically the taxes are being used to subsidize military corporations. So that's one way. that is going to be used. And of course, as a result of these wars, you're going to have a refugee crisis. As a result of climate change, you're going to have a refugee crisis, and the spillover of these people who cannot really, we have desertification of land across the equator. You're going to have people move north towards Europe. What's going to happen then? You're going to have acceleration of the right wing. You're going to have a catastrophe, and this is only going to accelerate the pro-colonial, settler colonial project or pro-Zionist right of the UK, of the US. It's going to accelerate climate change denialism, because of course the right wing is completely out of odds with the consensus on climate change, where 99% of climate change scientists agree that climate change is at a tipping point right now. We are approaching 1.5 centigrade increase and closer towards 2 centigrade increase with the lack of action on what's taking place. And let's not forget that part of the reason why Gaza is such a important proposition to the ruling class is because Gaza is it's got oil fields that's been discovered. A lot of oil companies are very happy to take a piece of that power and keep the military conflict going, so that as to take advantage of the situation and extract as much resources from that region. So that's where we are. And the centrists are not helping. The centrists are actually accelerating things. It's weird that I have more in common with some of the things that, not only a few things, but more in common with Candace Owens and some of those people on the libertarian right, and Dave Smith, even though Dave Smith is not so much of a conservative as Candace Owens is. When it comes to the issue of foreign policy, the investment in foreign wars is just unnecessary. It's not something that is to the benefit of your own country. And whilst I disagree with some of the nationalistic rhetoric of Candace Owens, and she could be just a grifter or an opportunist, and I think it's very possible. But I have more agreement with her than I do with someone like Joe Biden or Keir Starmer, who don't see, or don't seem to have the empathy which you expect to have from a leader, a competent leader, that is, to govern a nation where there's rising inequality, where so many people are suffering in a cost of living crisis. It's not a cost of living crisis in that, it's come out of nowhere. The reason why we have an issue with inflation is because of, unlike what happened in Margaret Thatcher's era, it wasn't an increase in wages. It's actually an increase in the cost of goods, brought on by an increase in the cost of transportation through increase of oil due to the Ukraine war, but also the issue of Brexit, where you had a loss of hundreds of billions of pounds from the economy. And of course, meaning that the fixes that are necessary, for example, Liz Truss borrowing billions of pounds whilst not really doing anything to increase taxes to make up for it, means that it just loses the authority, loses the trustworthiness of the UK government, but also the economy itself. So that kind of loses a few tens of billions as well. So that's where we are right now. We have neoliberals trying to fix the economy, but actually destroying the economy in the process. Yeah, so things aren't looking too good in the short term, not even medium term. But I'm here to discuss the very long term, and I think there is a possibility that humanity can redeem itself. I think there are certain values at play that are necessary for our human survival, and one of which is humanitarianism, it's solidarity, it's camaraderie, it's consideration for our individualism, as well as the greater whole. It's consideration for the ecology of our planet. And you can't have a thriving economy without having people with surplus cash to be able to spend in this economy. It works both ways. You can't just have all the power go towards the ruling class. But anyways, I hope you enjoy this video. I'll be discussing this in the power balance between the ruling class and the working class, which is not unlike and is not separated from the ruling class support of Israel in its bombardment of Gaza. It's all connected. And the rise of the far right is not too far away from us, with Keir Starmer and coming into power, with looks like Donald Trump coming into power. At least in America, it's closer to home, and it's closer in time, because looks like Donald Trump will best Biden from the looks of things, because Biden is losing, hemorrhaging voters from his betrayal of the Palestinian people, just doing these quick aesthetic changes. At least, we got a little buffer period with Keir Starmer. He's going to be seen as useless. He's just going to be seen as this, a styrofoam robot. And in the background, you're going to see the rise of the far right, because we know that Keir Starmer is useless and is just a bureaucrat. Another person who tries to be like Margaret Thatcher, but without any charisma, and also tries to have the moral authority, moral credibility, but for those with conscientious moral values, we see right through it. So that's where I am right now. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be very much appreciated. Thank you.